Hi, everybody. Welcome to McEntee Law's First Friday. My name is Ray McEntee. I'm one of the partners here at the McEntee Law Group, and I'm going to be doing the First Friday today. I'm a little bit under the weather, so it's probably not going to be as long as usual, but I have some updates of kind of what's going on at the moment that we can talk about. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the H-1B registration period. It's that time of year again for H-1B applications. So the H-1B registration period opened up on March 1st, which was on Wednesday. It opened up at noon Eastern time, and it's set to run until March 17 at noon Eastern time. And that's the registration period. And some other important dates are March 31st. If USCIS has received enough registrations between March 1st and March 17th, they'll conduct a random lottery. And on March 31st, this is when they'll notify registrants that have been selected. They'll start notifying them on March 31st. April 1st, this is the earliest that you can file your fiscal year 2024 H-1B cap petitions. So that's kind of the date. So March 1st to March 17th for the registration. If there's enough applications received in that date, then March 31st people will be notified, and then April 1st is the earliest you can file your applications. And one important thing I want to mention to people is please avoid duplicate registrations. A duplicate registration is the same employer with the same applicant being registered more than once. It's really important that you don't do this. And I believe there's a feature in the online registration process that allows you to check, but that's obviously mightn't be 100% foolproof. So just make sure that you're not submitting duplicate registrations. If it's found out that you have submitted duplicate registrations, my understanding is that all registrations for that employer and that applicant will be found to be invalid. So very important. Okay, so the registration period, how it goes, it changed a few years ago, moved to an online registration period initially. And what happens here is the prospective petitioner employer needs to create a registrant account online with USCIS, and then what they do is provide some company information, and then they can add applicants to their registrant account. The registration fee, it's a $10 fee per applicant. Excuse me. Yes, it's a $10 fee per applicant, and it's an online registration period. It's changed a bit. Previously, it used to be you would have to fully prepare an application, submit it, and then they would conduct a random lottery if there was more applicants than available H-1B visas. This time, what has changed recently is now you do an online registration first, find out if you've been selected, and then you go on, you submit your application, your H-1B petition. Okay, so as I said, the registration period is between the 1st and the 17th of March. If they receive enough registrations in that period, they'll conduct a random lottery. I would say it's safe to assume that they will receive enough registrations in that period. For fiscal year 2022, they received, I think it was roughly 310,000 registrations. For fiscal year 2023, they received almost 500,000 H-1B registrations. And you're looking at, I think it's about 80, including the master's cap, there's about 85,000 H-1B visas available each year. So that's, 4 or 5 to 1 ratio of registrations to available H-1B visas. So I think it's safe to assume that there will be a random lottery conducted. So if you are interested in submitting applications, the window is now open and it runs until the 17th at noon Eastern. So you need to register before then. Okay, so that's the H-1B registration period. Another update I wanted to talk about is the student visas. There's been a slight change to that. Recently, it's been announced that students are now able to apply for their F1 visas up to a year in advance of their I-20 start date. The Form I-20 is kind of information on your college program and when it starts. And as I said, you're now able to apply up to 1 year before the I-20 start date. This is great. There's a lot of, even still post-COVID now, we're still seeing that depending on what consulates you're applying in, there's a lot of backlogs for people to get in for interviews. Resources are limited in Department of State. There's only so many officers and only some conducting interviews. So, they're working through backlogs that were created through COVID. So this extra year, it just, provides should give students enough time to get in, to get their visa sorted before university starts. Also, there's some students may find themselves in administrative processing. This is an additional security background checks that happens once an individual goes in for an interview. There's certain things that can trigger administrative processing, and unfortunately, you're not going to know that you're in administrative processing until it happens. It can be something as simple as having the same name as somebody who has shown up on some list somewhere, to other issues. So hopefully that being able to apply a year out will give individuals enough time to kind of get their visa in time for school. So that's great. Okay, so that's the student visas. Another thing I'd like to talk about is USCIS fee increase. So a while ago, USCIS proposed increasing fees across the board. USCIS funded by the filing fees that they charge for various different applications. So there hasn't been a fee increase in several years, and recently enough, USCIS proposed increasing fees across the board. The proposed increases, they were substantial, and it varies depending on what type of visa application, immigrant or non-immigrant visa application you would see, but it will see substantial fee increases. We're currently in the comment period, which I believe is for 60 days. So USCIS is now accepting comments from people in relation to fees and kind of what their thoughts are on that. The proposed fees, they may well change. We may see a change in what was proposed based on, when they review all of those comments. They may go by what the recommendations they received are, and they may edit the proposed fee increases. So that is TBD. We'll have to wait and see. There's no set date, I don't believe, as to when those fees will increase, but I would assume it'll be later this year. So, if you are looking at filing a visa application, it might make sense to look at doing it sooner rather than later to, be able to file it at the current fees, just something to keep in mind. Another thing is that we are March. St. Patrick's Day is coming up, and March is officially recognized as Irish American Heritage Month. I believe there was a proclamation written, I think it might have been last year or earlier this year, by President Biden, that officially acknowledges March as Irish American Heritage Month, which is great. So another thing to keep in mind. Another thing is our newsletter just came out. So we do a monthly newsletter. It typically comes out at the end of the month. And, this provides a summary of events, what's going on, immigration, any updates that have happened, any proposed changes. And it's very informative. There's a link to our newsletter in our bio. If you are, if you do want to get some, if you're looking for some, to be kept up to date with what's going on in immigration wise, please sign up to our monthly newsletter. And, it's very informative. And, as I said, it's released at the end of the month typically. Okay. So also our managing partner, Fiona, recently released her ebook. It is all to do with startups in the US. The book is called U.S. Immigration Options for Startups, Accelerate Your American Dream. This is a fantastic resource for anybody who is in the startup scene and is looking into immigration options in the US. It's available on Amazon to download. And as I said, it's a fantastic resource. Okay, so I'm going to go. We got some questions that I will kind of run through quickly. First one is, can I travel on ESTA while my visa application is pending? Well, this is a tricky question. It depends, really. First things is, where did you apply for your visa? Were you in the US and are you applying for an extension of status or a change of status, or are you applying from outside the US? If you're applying from inside the US, then no, you shouldn't be leaving and trying to re-enter on ESTA. If you're applying for a visa outside the US and you're consular processing, then, yes, possibly. If you're eligible to use ESTA, then, and you have a pending consular application, then, you should be able to enter the US on ESTA while that application is pending. But, I will say that you are always subject to inspection and upon entry to the US on ESTA, and CBP officers have a lot of discretion to admit or deny entry on ESTA. Also, another thing to note is that if you do have a pending application and you come in on ESTA, you are going to have to leave the US to go back to get your visa stamp and to then return in that non-immigrant classification. One of the disadvantages of traveling to the US on ESTA is that there's very limited circumstances where you can, file any sort of application while here in ESTA. You're not able to do any sort of change of status from ESTA in the US. So, while technically you could potentially travel into the US while your application is pending, your visa application is pending, you are going to have to leave, return to have your interview, or apply by mail to get that visa stamp and then return to the US. Okay, another question is, do I need press to get an O1 visa? Well, that's another good question. It depends, really. Press it depends. Are you going to be relying on press as one of the criterias for your O1? With the O1, you need to show that you have been nominated for or received a major national or international award in your field. If not, then you need to look at alternate criteria, and press is one of those criteria. So if press is one of your criteria you're going to be relying on, absolutely, you will need press to satisfy that criteria. Also, I like kind of what we refer to as the Google test. It is always good to have press. If you're applying for an O1, it's always good to have a lot of press. A lot of the times officers can just put your name into Google, and if your name shows up a lot in the first page with various different press and articles and stuff like that, typically that's a good thing. Officers will kind of look at that, and that's a good thing. But yeah, press it's always important for O1s. It's not essential. You don't absolutely need to have it, but it definitely helps your case. And you need it if press is one of your criteria, you'll need press. Okay, another question is, what is premium processing? How can I use it for my case? It's a good question. Premium processing is an expedited government service that's available for most certain visa, non-immigrant and immigrant visa applications. So it will depend on what type of case you have as to whether you're able to use it or not. For most cases, it's as right now the current premium processing fee is $2,500, and that will ensure that USCIS will take some sort of action on your case within 15 calendar days. So either they'll approve it, issue a request for evidence, or potentially issue a notice of intention to deny. That's within 15 calendar days of them receiving the case. If it's an EBC multinational executive manager application, or that's an immigrant petition, or an EB2 national interest waiver petition, it's not 15 calendar days. It's actually 45 calendar days that USCIS has to adjudicate the case. And the same thing again, they either need to approve it, issue a request for evidence, or possibly a notice of intention to deny. So that's kind of what premium processing is. It's an expedited government service that's available for certain applications. For the most part, it's a $2,500 fee currently, and for the majority of cases, it's within 15 calendar days. You'll have some update from USCIS. If it's an immigrant petition for a multinational executive or a manager, or for a national interest waiver, is 45 calendar days. Again, would like to reference our managing partner's ebook, US Immigration Options for Startups, Accelerate Your American Dream. That has a good section about premium processing. It provides a lot more information that is available. It'll talk all about premium processing. It's a great resource, and it's available to download on Amazon. What else to talk about? I'll also just talk about consular processing in general. I've been doing a lot of this recently, and One thing that I've noticed is that for individuals, if you're looking to come to the US for just for a vacation, as tourist, or you want to maybe come for a conference, and you're not able to apply for ESTA. So there's ESTA is it's basically for visa waiver participating countries. You're able to come to the US for very short periods of time as a visitor. For a visitor for businesses or tourism, you can come in and you don't need to apply for a visa. Individuals who are not part of individuals who are citizens of non-participating visa waiver countries, or individuals who are not eligible to travel to the US on ESTA, perhaps for previous immigration overstays, if they've been refused entry before, or have been refused a visa, they won't be eligible to travel on ESTA. Anybody who is not eligible to travel on ESTA on the visa waiver program that wants to come for as a visitor for business or tourism, they need to apply for a B visa. What I've seen, it is somewhat consular specific depending on where you are and where you're applying, but what we've seen is that there's extensive backlogs for individuals applying for tourist visas. So whether it's a visitor for business, to come over at a conference, to come to some training, to have business meetings, or to come for a vacation, to come on holidays, for whatever reason, there's extensive delays. I would advise, applying for visas well in advance, specifically for tourist visas. Some consulars post there's no appointments for years. This is a result of COVID and all the backlogs that they're working through, and just kind of tourist visas being going down the list of priorities, and Department of State's limited resources. That's something to keep in mind, though, is that if you are looking at potentially coming to the US for a holiday, or you have a conference next year that's coming up, my advice is to apply. Give yourself plenty of time to apply in advance. Okay, so here, I got a question here. How long does a spousal application generally take, and can I work once it's granted? So that depends. As if it's a marriage-based green card application from here in the US, processing times, I would say it's roughly about a year, what we're seeing. If you apply for work and travel authorization, as part of that process, you could get temporary work authorization. That could come as quick as 2 months. You're not going to be able to, if you're not in a valid status that allows you to work, you'll have to wait until you get your temporary employment authorization. Once you get your temporary employment, your EAD, your employment authorization document, then you're eligible to work. And the way this EAD works is this allows you to work. It's unrestricted employment, allows you to work while your green card application is being processed. Also, another development what we've seen is in green card applications here in the States. We've seen that they're, if a marriage-based green card, if they're able to approve it without the need for an interview, we've seen that the I-130 petition and the I-485 are being approved without actually having the need for both applicants to go in for the interview, which is great. It's a lot more convenient, and it's something we've seen recently change. Okay, so a spousal application, if you're doing it from outside the US, if it's going to be consular process, an immigrant visa for a spouse, I'd say that processing time, that varies. I would say that's about a year. That takes about a year for the process to complete. So yeah. See if we got any other questions here. Yeah, no, I think that's all the questions here. So just to recap on what we kind of chatted about. Okay, hang on. Okay, got another question here. If you apply for a green card, but you only come and go to the US for work a couple of times a year, will your green card be taken away? This is a good question. When you apply for a green card, you need to show that your domicile is in the US, that you're a resident of the US. It's kind of a grayish area if somebody's spending more times outside the US, all their ties are outside the US, their homes outside, their bank accounts outside, their jobs outside. it's very hard to demonstrate to that you're primarily you're a permanent resident of the United States. There is a rule that if you leave the US for we typically don't advise people to spend extended periods of time in the US as a permanent resident. I wouldn't advise for more than 6 months at a time. Definitely not for more than a year. If you're outside for more than a year, there's a presumption that you have abandoned your permanent residency, and you can absolutely have issues when you come back in. That was relaxed a little bit due to COVID, but typically, we'd only kind of recommend getting a green card if your plan is to be in the US and to be here primarily, then it makes sense to do a green card. If you're just coming in and out a little bit and you're living outside the US, I don't know if it necessarily would make sense to apply for a green card. You could have issues, it could a lot of times it'll depend on the CBP officer when you're coming back in, and you do need to demonstrate that you're a permanent resident in the United States. And I said, if you are found to have abandoned your permanent residency, then you can forfeit your permanent residency. That can be definitely be an issue. Okay. So to go over what we kind of chatted about, H1B registration period. It's now open. It's open from now until the 17th of March. If you are an employer and you're a potential applicant and you're looking to apply for a H1B visa for this year, that will take effect in October of this year. You need to make your registration. If you don't submit a registration in a registration period, you got to wait till next year. That registration period is March 1st to March 17th. If they get enough registrations in that period, which I assume they will, they'll conduct a random lottery. March 31st is when they're going to start notifying people if they've been selected. April 1st is the earliest you can submit your petition. If the case gets approved, the earliest that will take effect is October 1st of this year. Avoid duplicate registrations. That's the same employer, same applicant more than once. If you do this and you're found to have done this, my understanding is that all registrations for that employer and that applicant are invalid. It's a $10 registration fee. So yeah, that's the H1B. If you're looking at it, you better get to it quickly because the window is open for another 2 weeks. It closes at noon Eastern 2 weeks from today. Student visas. Student applicants, they can now apply for a visa up to a year before their I-20 start date. This is fantastic. It gives you more time to get your visa stamp and get here in time for college. USCIS fee increases. USCIS has proposed a fee increase. It's going to be substantial depending on what visa, what you're applying for. It's in the comment period, so it may change based on when they review everything. But it's coming down the line, and we don't know when it'll happen, but probably sometime this year. So if you're looking to file an application and you don't want to pay those increased fees, you should look to file something sooner rather than later. It's March. St. Patrick's Day is on the horizon. It's officially Irish American Heritage Month. And our newsletter. If you want to stay abreast of current events and immigration, please go to our bio. There's a link in our bio. Please sign up for a newsletter and you'll be added to it, and it comes out at the end of every month. Also, anybody who's in the startup scene who wants to know about immigration options, please make sure to go to Amazon, and you can our managing partner, Fiona McEntee, has a book up there, a great, fantastic resource called US Immigration Options for Startups, Accelerate Your American Dream. That is fantastic. It's got so much information on immigration options for those in the startup world. It's a fantastic resource. Okay. I've got one more question. Can LPR parent apply for, can an LPR applying over 20-year-olds? Okay, viewpoint. Okay, we answered that one. Okay. Okay, I think that's everything right now. Yeah, I think that's all that's everything we have for this first Friday. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you found the information helpful. Oh, one thing I forgot to follow up again on that I had mentioned. B visas. There's extensive backlogs for B visas. So if you're looking to potentially come to the US for a holiday, or to to come over to a conference or trainings for as a tourist for limited business or tourism purposes, my advice is that you give yourself plenty of time to apply for these visas. There's extensive backlogs. Depending on where you are, it could be several years. And this is just due to the backlogs created through COVID. Hopefully things will kind of come back to normal, but you've got a holiday coming up next year. I would have advised, and you need to apply for a B visa. I would look into this now, as there are extensive backlogs. Okay, so I think that is everything. As again, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope everybody found it helpful, and we'll be back here again next month in April with the first Friday. Thank you. Have a great weekend.